when we think of what was happening in New Zealand 200 years ago, it paints a very different picture. And I love the fact that 200 years ago, on the 2nd of May, 1825, of course, some quick maths there from me. One of the things that we're talking about today is the challenges for missionary wives giving birth in isolated circumstances, and we're having this conversation on the eve of Mother's Day, of course, coming up this weekend.
Yes, so Nathaniel Turner has been invited to the monthly missionary prayer meeting that's being held at Rangiahoa in the Bay of Islands.
Okay.
So the Church Missionary Society, they're inviting the Wesleyan missionary to join them, Nathaniel Turner.
Yep.
And the reason is because Nathaniel and Anne Turner were staying at Kerikeri. Now, there was always a very close cooperation between the church missionaries and the Wesleyans, but particularly in this circumstances, because Anne Turner was giving birth to her first child. Now, they were usually based at Whangaroa, and she was the only European female there, and very isolated, actually in a very difficult mission.
Yeah.
And so when it comes time to giving birth, this can be a very uncertain time for women, particularly in those days. So what the pattern is that when you entered into confinement, as they called it,
yeah.
You would travel, or other missionary wives would travel to you. And in this case, they came and stayed at the more established and more secure mission of Kerikeri, where Anne could give birth and have other women, because Maori had their birth practices, but that they're very different from the European ones, and this was an issue for women in mission, because there's one sense in which the men could say, well, let's just scatter ourselves around the island and go wherever the Maori were living.
Yeah.
But for women who were giving birth and on quite a regular basis for the missionaries, to be in an isolated place meant being days away from any other European women or medical care. And from the very early days, women were very keen that the CMS would send out medical care. So in this case here, Anne Turner, she's in the care of Charlotte Kemp and Harriet Shepherd, and you had Mary Ann Williams close by here, along with also Martha Clark was there. So there's a group of women who could care for her, and a couple of days later, after this Monday, she gives birth. Yeah, so I mean, I think it's
an amazing story as well of the cooperation. I mean, for the guys, they've all got their degrees and their theological qualifications, but the women are just saying, you know what, we're women together in this isolated part of the world. Let's look after each other, and perhaps the differences between Wesleyans and Anglicans evaporate in those circumstances.
Exactly. Now, the men were having their monthly prayer meeting in Rangiahoa, and but during their prayer meeting, the first news comes of the battle between Ngāpuhi and Ngāti Whātua, which is called Te Ika a Ranganui. And this has happened just a few days beforehand. And the first news is coming back to the Bay of Islands. And the shock horror is that the head chief of Rangiahoa, Whare Pauaka, has been shot.
Wow.
And this caused pandemonium there. They are firing off muskets and their shouts. And so you can imagine the missionaries trying to pray and concentrate. Muskets are very loud. Now, for Maori, the firing of muskets, a bit like some cultures would light fireworks and other things. The loud noise, it's a spiritual, it's to ward off spiritual attack. Because when your head chief is slain or injured, this opens the whole tribe to attack from Atua, and so it kind of the way that the mission, just as the women were very isolated, the men would have had a very much a sense that they were very isolated in a different and a very violent world.
Yeah, certainly. And
it turned out that the report on Whare Pauaka, he had been shot through the shoulder, but he hadn't died.
Okay.
So, but that only comes a few days later.
Exactly. You can't get up-to-date reports on this one. They're very different times 200 years ago. And important to put this in the context of this is in the middle of the Musket Wars. These were very violent times for New Zealand, and very much a contrast of what is happening in one of the most violent battles in New Zealand history. With a group of missionaries who are also having a spiritual battle, not through firing their muskets, but through interceding and praying for their community.
Exactly. And there are many Western voices saying they shouldn't be wasting their time with this. Maori are not capable of responding. And it's really because of the scriptures telling the missionaries, yes, the gospel has that power to transform people, whatever circumstances, that they continue to hold that the preaching of God's word, the interceding of prayer would eventually bear fruit. As it did later that year, when the first Maori convert, Christian Rangi, was baptized. And then, of course, from 1830, the Maori conversion began. So it's 5 years. So this is 10 years into the mission. So persistence in preaching the word, and you have to believe that the power of the gospel can transform lives, because there are plenty of doubters and naysayers.
Now, it's easy, I suppose, to look back and go, well, hey, light was just on the horizon. 5 years later, there'll be this transformation within the Māori community. And I mean, hey, you've pretty much written the book on what happened then. But to be able to hold on to that faith in these difficult circumstances, because, I mean, what was happening down south, what was unfolding in the Musket Wars, the Utu, the retaliation that flowed on from this particular battle. It was going to get a lot darker before the light would shine, I suppose.
I think Te Ika Ranganui, it's 200 years of this battle. It was just inland from Kaiwaka. For Aucklanders will know where that is. And this had been brewing since at least 1807 and beforehand. The two great powers within the North Island, Ngāpuhi and Ngāti Whātua. Ngāti Whātua centered around the southern end of the Kaipara Harbour at this stage, and Ngāpuhi inland from the Bay of Islands. There had been this contest. There'd been all kinds of endeavours to make peace, but it's come to a head at this major battle. And it's probably, from a European point of view, the most documented Maori early Maori battle of the Musket Wars. In that we have testimony from Ngāti Whātua side to the native land courts as to what happened, but also as people returned from the battle, the missionaries, George Clark in particular, interviews people there and get an account of what actually happened. We have also Honi Hika's testimony as to what happened, and I think for New Zealand history, it's important for us to understand what happened too, and why these kind of battles happened, and what it meant for Maori to actually give up warfare and the seeking of Utu, and to respond to the gospel. There was a narrative in the 1960s, I guess it's the Vietnam War and such like. People were saying, "Oh, Maori were exhausted. That's why they gave up. The Musket Wars left to exhaustion." That is not what you see in the missionary testimony. Maori actually had a desire, almost a delight in conflict and war, and pursuing justice. And it burned like a fire. And it was really the gospel that brought an end to the Musket Wars.
That transformation, the seed sown at a prayer meeting 200 years ago this week, even as the battle raged, a few miles down country from there. Malcolm, this is a fascinating story. Thank you for what you do in this area. Thank you for taking the time to chat with us today.
That's quite all right. Good to see you.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.